Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Culture. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, there's all sorts of things going on with the Obi-Wan TV show, and it might not be the Obi-Wan TV show that you might be looking forward to.
Well, this thing has had a really strange production period, Scott Hilfer, because as you may know, in early 2020, it was actually postponed, and nobody really knew what was going on. Like, scripts were ready to go, production was about to begin, and then suddenly it wasn't happening anymore. And it wasn't because of the pandemic. Apparently, it was because the original scripts needed retooling. They needed overhauling. And for the longest time, we've all kind of speculated on why. Like, what specifically was changed, what was wrong with those scripts.
Put Grogu in.
Yeah, maybe they were just
Slide
trying
him in
to
there.
get Grogu in somewhere. But now, thanks to a report on The Hollywood Reporter, we have a bit more information as to what was changed. And the big thing is that Darth Maul was apparently in those original scripts and has since been taken out and replaced with Darth Vader. Now, we don't actually know, according to these reports, how big of a role Darth Maul was going to play in it. We know that he was going to be hunting down Obi-Wan Kenobi, but we don't know like the full capacity, whether he was going to be the only villain, whether he was just going to be one of many villains, or what. But yeah, the story goes that apparently it was back in the day, the original Darth Maul actor Ray Park was apparently on set shooting some test footage while pre-production was underway. Then director Deborah Chow apparently went to Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, who were just finishing The Mandalorian at this point, and essentially went, could you look at these scripts, could you give us some notes? And they had a lot of notes, which I'll get into, but first reactions, what do you think of Darth Maul originally being in there and now being taken out?
Well, so I'm definitely, I love the Star Wars, followed it for most of my life, but I'm very much checked out at the minute post Episode 9. You've been following this a lot more than me. My general thoughts on this show, I thought that was always the premise, that it was going to be Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, because Hayden Christensen was attached to the project. So for me, I was always thinking that Darth Maul would be in there in some capacity, because why not? They kind of had him in Solo randomly, waving his lightsaber around, and I was like, well, you could do that. So I've kind of always assumed that, Vader was going to be in there anyway. I'm assuming that you're building to the idea of Filoni and Favreau being like, do way more of him. But still, overall, I thought you might as well do something with Darth Maul, because unless you're watching Rebels or unless you're watching the Clone Wars or whatever, it's rare that you get that character. It even feels like a character. To a lot of people, he's just an angry embodiment of 2000s Tood. And that's fine for me, listening to POD in 2000, but it depends what you want from the character.
I mean, there is a whole thing of, obviously, Darth Maul has had a really beloved run in the Clone Wars, and then, his final showdown with Obi-Wan and Rebels is obviously really well loved, but in live action terms, he's kind of had a false start every time. You mentioned Solo there. Obviously, he was the big tease at the very end of that movie. Then Solo didn't do well. We lost all of those movies. Obi-Wan was actually transformed into a TV show, and now it sounds like they kind of were flirting with bringing back Maul in a live action space again, and then at the very last minute, it kind of went, oh yeah, we're not going to do that now either. But it's interesting what you mentioned about Darth Vader, because apparently he wasn't originally part of the Obi-Wan story, and he was brought in after Dave Filoni figured out a way to incorporate him in the narrative, which for me was fascinating. Apparently, they also told Deborah Chow to go bigger with the series, to expand its scope and make it even more epic. Apparently, they also had some notes on the structure of the storyline. Obviously, this was when The Mandalorian's first season had just dropped, and everyone had a big response to it. And apparently, the original scripts for the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show they were too similar in structure to The Mandalorian, because they originally had Obi-Wan kind of protecting Luke Skywalker, and that kind of father-baby, I guess, for lack of a better term, father-baby dynamic apparently was too close to the Grogu kind of story.
Luke whizzing around in a little crib. Just loved it.
That's kind of fascinating to me. But yeah, so obviously a lot of changes in that regard. We also had another report out the other day from Kathleen Kennedy, who said that the original scripts were too dark and they wanted the story to be a little bit more uplifting, so that was what they were working on as well. So yeah, a lot of kind of tweaks to the story. And just to get back in here, one final tidbit, the way that they managed to get Vader in here was that Dave Filoni figured out that he could incorporate the Grand Inquisitor from Star Wars Rebels and give them their live action debut.
The thing that's interesting, I want to talk about that dark stuff for a second, because for me, one of the most essential Star Wars movies is Rogue One. I love that movie feels quite grim and dark, and it feels like this sort of like soil that you sort of need to allow the plant of Luke Skywalker to grow.
I love that.
In Episode 4, and for me, Rogue One enhances Episode 4 in a way that I didn't see coming necessarily. I kind of thought when they started talking about the idea of, we're picking out the idea of focusing on the plans and how did they get stolen and whatever, and I was like, cool, that's a nice angle that you can do, but I think that Rogue One fundamentally enhances all the original movies in a really cool way. It sort of recontextualizes what that fight is, and what they're fighting for, and it works. Which is to say that it's a bit of a shame that they're maybe not doing something similar in Obi-Wan's case, because that would only enhance the fact that Ben Kenobi then gets to interact with Luke Skywalker properly in Episode 4. Yeah. If they made him go through more beforehand, if we knew more about his struggle, how he was living alone, etc. But at the same time, it's not to say that all that material has been completely ditched, assumedly, but I just kind of hope there's something in there. I want these things to enhance the originals, or at least do something that enhances the stuff that we have beforehand.
That's it, it's always risky, making a project like this so many years after the fact and trying to connect it and enhance the original. Like we've seen lots of franchises try that, and it actually kind of undermines the original. But like you said, Star Wars in a lot of ways has been good at, filling that space in significant ways and not having stories just feel like filler. Going back to what they said about it being too dark, they still kind of stress, Ewan McGregor's obviously been doing a lot of press for the show. Ewan McGregor still stressed that, they're picking up in a bleak place. Like even in the trailer, Obi-Wan's like, we lost the fight, he's not in a good space. He thinks, he's looking after Luke, but he's dejected. He feels like a lot of this stuff was his fault, Anakin's rise to be Darth Vader. He did train him. In his eyes, he did sort of like let this happen in a way. So obviously there's going to be dark material there, but I think what Kathleen Kennedy's talking about is that they recognize that they're not trying to like pick up immediately with an Obi-Wan and have him cracking wise and being like really uplifting. But I think what they wanted to do, according to this review, this kind of interview and my own kind of assumptions, is to build to a more uplifting place, build to a point where you get to an understanding that a new hope is on the horizon. I think that kind of makes for, hopefully, a nice character arc for Obi-Wan from start to finish, where he's originally like doing this job kind of just because he's got nothing else, and then doing the job because he genuinely has hope. I think that's cool.
I have two questions like overall for this show, because we need to get him to a place where he is at the beginning of Episode 4. So one, he needs to learn how to do the Krayt Dragon thing.
He just learns it from you. There you go.
He just learned it from me. There's like 3 versions across Star Wars history, so I don't know which one they're going to canonize in that regard. But also things like the fact that he says, I've not gone by the name Obi-Wan in quite some time. The fact that he has I might be able to drop my Star Wars card here, but he does have Vader's lightsaber in a box, because he gives it to Luke in Episode 4. It's been a while since I watched Episode 4, been a good few years, but he does say this is your father's lightsaber. And whatever, so like, you need to be able to see those things together. So it's like, we're going to spin way off, do a few loop-the-loops over here, Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan, all these different things, but then they also need to be tied off and be buried again, so that he kind of ostensibly forgets them until we get to Episode 4 again.
That's kind of why I personally think it may be smart that they dropped Maul, because, with the Vader thing, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they've had like, they've not had a rematch in like that before, A New Hope, at least in any of the TV shows. With Maul, obviously, like I said at the start, he's appeared in the Clone Wars, he's appeared in Rebels. They have their final showdown in Rebels, which I think is a couple years after the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is set. So that's kind of shading in an area that's already been shaded in a way that if you take Maul out and you focus on, Vader and the Inquisitor, that hasn't been shaded in as much. Maybe it gives them more opportunity to do those loop-de-loops and get back to the start without it feeling even more like in the margins than it may do if they did go down the Maul route.
Do you think, in regards to being asked to make things wider, do they do Palpatine again?
Well, Scott Elford, I mean, he's certainly involved. He's going to have to.
I'm just thinking of things they can bring in, and I quite like, I think it's called Prince Shizo from one of the old novels, the idea that someone else was in Palpatine's room when he was talking to Vader on the old hologram, and the idea that they can do this wider lore stuff. I'm just thinking, how many different purposes can the Obi-Wan series serve? And I don't want it to just be plain fan service. I mean, it's obviously they're not even going to do the live action version of him versus Maul like that was in Rebels, and we are going to get something more original, like, or whatever, like more focused around him versus Maul, and like you said, him struggling with the fact that he created him, etc. But I just wonder what other ancillary plot points they can bring in, or what other lore teasing things they can do. Like you said, they're doing the Inquisitor stuff, and maybe they are seeding more in this space, this really furtive space in between Episode 3 and 4, that you can do quite a lot with.
Dude, I'm excited for it, man. Like, I couldn't believe how much the trailer got me. Obviously, the Duel of the Fates was in there. Once that music kicked in, I was just thinking, maybe I'm just gonna be this. Maybe this is gonna be the best thing of all time. Maybe this is gonna be the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know. That's quite high expectations, but that's where I'm at right now.
I will match that if they have a scene where he has to learn how to do the Krayt Dragon. That's just all I want. Because one of them's like a oh, and the other one's like a woo. So it's a thing. But let us know what you think down in the comments below of the Obi-Wan series ditching Darth Maul and potentially going bigger. Whatever you think that's going to mean going forward. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye bye.